Themselves, give your name, your family, how long you've been married, and your favorite thing about your spouse.
I'm Brenda Ulinsky. We are a family of 6 children, 6 grandchildren, 3 son-in-laws. Meaning 2 of our children, adult women children, are in your audience. And my favorite thing about my spouse is that he continues to grow as a man of God, and that he's not afraid to admit where he needs to grow and listen to God about it.
Well, thanks. Since I'm the second half, I'm Scott Ulinsky, same story, 6 children. How long have we been married?
27 years.
27 years. I was 28 this year, I think. So, I think one of the most favorite things about my wife is also that she continues to grow, and she's able to say she's wrong. That's a big thing, to be able to admit your faults.
That's a new thing.
So I'm thankful in the way that God's growing her as well, and allowing her to say that, there's 2 parts to a story, and I can be wrong. So God's working in her life, and it's awesome.
I'm Kevin Lloyd. Me and Janelle have been married 13 years. We have 2 boys, Cole and Brandon, and we've been coming to Smoky Point since 2003. And one of my favorite things about my wife is her sense of adventure, her willingness to try things and to take on growth with God's help.
Hi, I'm Janelle Lloyd, and you mentioned that we have the 2 boys. We've been married for 13 years, and my favorite thing, actually I got a couple of them, but one, I love his outgoing personality. Anybody that knows him knows that everybody in a room will know him quickly, or he'll know everybody in the room. And I love that about him because that's completely opposite of me. So I love that about him, and it stretches me to get outside of my comfort zone as well. And I love how he loves me, and it's only been through the grace of God that he's been able to put himself aside and to love me well, and to love me how I need to be loved. So.
I'm Mike Pokswinski, and we've been married 42 years, almost this year, 42 years. And we have 3 sons. They're all married. Obviously have 3 daughter-in-laws, and we got 5 grandchildren. And the thing I love about Leslie the most is their dedication and love for the Lord. And with that, it just kind of trickles down to the rest of the family, and we're just real happy about it.
And I'm Leslie, Michael's other half. And let's see, I'm trying to think if there's anything. You know, this is a special treat for me because typically I'm over in the other building watching a lot of your children, and this is the first time in all the years that I've been at MOPS that I've actually been in this group. And I've been here since the 2nd year that MOPS started here at Smoky Point. So
we'll keep you in here, Leslie.
Thank you. Wade, you might not want to say that after this panel is done. And the things that I love most about my dear husband, of course, is his love for the Lord. But I love his incredible, generous spirit. He is generous not only with our financial assets, but he's been gifted with the gift of helps. And he loves to help people, and he does that often, and he does it well. And he loves generously, and he lives generously, and that's what I like about my wife.
And we, Ken and I, have reaped the benefits of some of Mike's generosity. So we want to thank you all for that also. He is a great help. Okay, question number 1. Besides date nights, how do you keep the passion alive? Or, if it's gone, how would you suggest getting it back? Also, what would you suggest to do to reconnect in the busy season?
Is this going to a certain person right now, or?
I don't remember.
This is one that you, yeah. Go ahead and tell them what you have made some notes about. but-
Since I only have two hands, one has coffee. Yeah. So, how do you keep the passion alive? We've been married for 27 years. I told her I would probably embarrass her a little bit, but after 27 years of marriage, my wife's a beautiful woman to me and attractive. With that, I think date night is so important, and it doesn't happen if you don't plan it. It's biblical as far as planning. If you don't have a plan, you're going to fail. So we plan those. It's easier now we don't have kids, but when we did have kids like you guys, we took advantage of just being able to sit down with each other. We love coffee. We go to Starbucks a lot, things like that. We did movie dates. But recently, even more important, I think, because to keep it alive is something as simple as just connecting with your spouse.
You wrote down about making lists and swapping. Remember?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, because I don't have my book open. And I didn't realize I was going to be crammed into this small area. But, it sounds kind of trivial, but when you think about your relationship and your life as having two tanks, one being a pressure tank and the other one being something that fills you, or one tank and something that fills it and something that depletes it. And I would recommend making a list. What fills your life? What gives you? What gets you going? What charges you? Both with your spouse, and maybe, and it can be without your spouse, because charging your tank might be something as spending time together with friends that without kids, and your spouse can watch kids while you're doing that. And then what drains your tank? So make a list. What fills your tank? What drains your tank? You fill it out. Have your husband or your spouse do that, and share those with each other so that you can work in each other's lives in a way that because I can think that I'm doing something that fills my wife's tank, when actually I'm depleting it. For a lot of years I was a workaholic, and I thought to love my wife was to bring home a paycheck, and I didn't know that, you know what, now I come home, hey, how was your day, honey? I know you were going to meet with, maybe meeting with an in-law is tough for you ladies. Maybe a mother-in-law is a really tough situation, and to be able to speak, if your spouse was to be able to say to you, hey, I know you met with your mom or whoever might be that difficult person in your relationship, how'd that go today? Can you tell me about that? And just listen. You wouldn't believe the connection that you'll make with your spouse if you'll begin to listen, attentive listening, intentional listening, and to be able to make that time. And what happens after that, it's just amazing. So I think that you've got, holding hands, holding each other. Too many times we as couples fail. We take so well care of our kids, especially you moms, that you neglect yourself. And you have needs. Those needs need to be shared with that other person in your life that you love so that they're fully aware of your needs. Because if they don't know, they might be thinking they're feeling your needs, but filling them in a way that they think you need, but not yet in what you need. So they need to know them, make them clear, and work through those. Anything to add to that?
Well, looking your husband in the eyes and touching your husband, you want to be the only person in his life that's looking him in the eyes and touching him. So, yeah. But you know what I mean when I say that?
Would anybody else add to that? There's a second part to it, though, that I just want to touch on, because it says if it's gone, it's gone for a reason. And I think in that list, truthfully, I believe in that list, if you're writing what empties your tank and what fills your tank, and your spouse loves you and cares for you, and you love your spouse and care for them, you're going to be looking at that, and you're going to be intentional about doing the things that fill that, and you'll find that the passion comes back. It can't not come back. So I'm a firm believer in that.
Can I say something? I found a list that he had an alarm set to on his phone, that was the list that he's talking about for me. So he really is intentional about doing it. So I love that about you too.
How best should I handle my spouse who is very opinionated about my personal appearance and often doesn't approve? And there's several examples: tattoos, hair coloring, piercings, haircut, outfit. How do I embrace my own personality? Mrs. Ulinsky's also.
Very briefly, check the heart of what's going on and why it's a problem to you, and check the heart of your spouse. Ask your spouse what's going on when you are dressing that way or having tattoos or whatever it is that issue. Find out why is the reaction. It's a heart thing. It's not an appearance thing, I believe. I really thought about that question a lot. So.
I'm hoping that growing up, your fathers, some of you may not have had fathers. This is what Leslie said when we may not be invited back. Right. So I'm hoping that was spoken into your lives as growing up as women. If it's a dress issue, dressing conservatively, let me tell you, women, from a man's point of view, it's a struggle. Men struggle with what we see. And it's a daily battle with every man that I've ever spoken to. And it's biblical. If you're calling yourself a believer, the Bible says, don't do things that would cause a brother to stumble. So I would say if it's a dress issue, it's biblical. You just have to dress modestly. And I just had this conversation with my daughter in the last couple of days. I said, I wish we didn't live in a fallen world, but we do. I wish you could wear what you want and it didn't cause men to stumble. I wish that sin didn't exist, but it does. And while we're on this side of heaven, we have to honor God, and He says to do that. So, with the tattoos and things like Brenda said, I think it's just check the heart. Ask your spouse. A lot of times, we get an attitude of when somebody tells us we can't do something or we shouldn't do something, we get defensive, and we want to start building why we're okay with that. Why we want to build our defense. We don't sit and listen. Ask whoever that is in your life. What's behind that? Why do you have a problem if I have a tattoo? Start hearing them out. Start hearing where they're coming from, because when you hear where they come from, it might soften your heart to understand where they're at. They very well may be able to explain very clearly to you that it's really their issue and not yours, and you can work that out. So.
Again, sorry. If anybody wants to add anything, feel free to. You want to add something?
I wholeheartedly agree with Scott and Brenda that it really is a heart issue. And I think, there's a lot of other ways to express yourself besides your hair and your clothes. I mean, we have artwork, we have our homes, we have the things that we like to do. So there's a lot of other ways to express who you are. And I being a hairdresser, I'll change my hair all the time. And he's very gracious, and he's like, well, if I don't like it, I know you're going to change it soon. But with that being said, I want to please my husband, and I want to make him happy, and I want to look nice for him. And, it says to count other people as greater than you, humble yourselves. And so to want to please your spouse and not only about yourself, I think is important. And so, I want to be attractive to him. And his opinion is important to me. So I think with that being said, if you're really set on, it's my way, I want to do this, it's like, well, again, it goes back to the heart issue. So communication is vitally important in your marriage, and there's other ways to express who you are. It doesn't have to be through your appearance. So.
And how about come to the How We Love small group 9-week session and learn how to actually really draw that out of your spouse? Yeah.
Okay, question number 3. How should I graciously and respectfully get out of family gatherings where my husband is alienated due to language barriers? The family is well aware of this problem, but hasn't made much effort to be more inclusive. This is for the Lloyds.
Definitely not handling this question because of personal experience. No hablo en español or any other language. However, I'm sensitive to that just because I know family gatherings in and of themselves can be difficult and challenging. We don't always get along with our in-laws or extended family, so that alone is enough. And then you throw on a difficulty in language barriers. There's a reason I don't get excited about the prospect of traveling overseas where I don't speak the language. There's not a part of that that appeals to me. So it could be difficult. I think clear, open, honest communication is kind of the answer to, it's kind of the prevailing answer to all these questions, is we just have to be able to confront difficult situations with honest communication. And again, with family, that becomes, we've done sermon series here where it's, when we're a follower of Christ, there's a cost involved. There's a cost involved in all of our walks of life. And when we follow Christ, there's a cost involved in that. And when we're dealing with family and we're dealing with difficult subjects, there's a cost. Because you don't want to alienate your family, who in this situation is alienating you over a spouse who speaks a different language. You need to respect. And years ago, Jim had a message. He talked about, the Bible talks about leaving and cleaving. And I think about young people in the home. And our society has built, I'll try not to get on my soapbox here, but our society has kind of made it clear that it's okay to cleave forever. And I don't think it is. I think we're to leave. We're to raise up our children and send them out. And I think a lot of times the difficulty young people have, an example of moving out, you marry somebody who has a difficulty in language. You're supposed to be pleasing your husband before you're supposed to please mom and dad at that point. So that's a difficult situation. So I just think you just have to approach it honestly and realize there's going to be a cost, but those things will heal with Christ's help.
You pretty much said it all. And I think it's communication with your family. They obviously already know of the situation. So I think it had said that here. The family is well aware of the problem and hasn't made much effort to be inclusive. They need to understand that your husband is number one. And if they already know about the situation, in my opinion, I think that you tell your family that if this continues, we won't be attending. That way they know up front and they're not surprised. And it speaks volumes to your husband, and it speaks volumes to your family as well, that he's number one in my life now, and you can choose to accept him or not. And I think at the same time it says that the family is well aware of the problem. I don't know if the husband has made attempts to speak that language as well. I don't know if that's necessarily his job, but also to be part of that family, to try to learn that language as well. But again, he's number one in your life, and the family needs to respect that, I think.
Quickly, I would add that families aren't always healthy. The Bible's very clear what Kevin said. Leave and cleave. The word for leave is to sever. It's to sever your relationship between your parents, and cleave, which is to be bonded to welded to your spouse. There are a lot of unhealthy situations where we take our families into and think we're doing the right thing because it's our mom or it's our dad. If it's unhealthy, sever it. We want to live out a life of godliness in front of them and show them example, but if it's hurting our family to do it. If it's hurting my spouse, you know, we live this. My wife doesn't have any relationship with her mother, which in turn affected her relationship with her brothers and sisters. So it's very hard. But we are to cleave to our wife, our husband and wife, and to sever that relationship, especially if it's unhealthy.
In close family, where you're the only one involved in church and give priority to church attendance and events, how do you handle criticism from said family about how much time you spend at church? Is there anything wrong with those commitments to your church home and church family? Swinski's.
How do you handle that criticism with as much grace and understanding towards your family as you can give them? They're trying to work this out. It's like, you know, they're putting their church family and their church functions ahead of us. And that's tough for family to understand because they're not believers. They're not in a place where they're putting their relationship with God first, right? So give your family as much grace and understanding as you can give them. Be kind, be patient. And having said that, take the time every once in a while to prioritize your attendance at church functions. It's important to miss once in a while and to show your family that while church and your relationship with God is very important in your life, they are important as well. Even though we are called to lead and cleave, they're still family, and we are still to honor our parents and our siblings. And so take the time once in a while. You can prioritize. You know which birthdays are monumental, they're huge, which anniversary celebrations, whatever it be, you can pick and choose a few. We can speak into this one because we're both from large families, and very early on in our attendance here, you could feel the pushback when we'd be saying, well, we can't, you know, sorry, can't make this one, we've got da-da-da-da, you know, I've got a meeting, I'm working with youth, I'm gone away on a retreat. And while no one in either of our families ever said much, there was that tension, and you could just feel it. So very early on, it was just an unspoken decision between us that there are times that you just need to do that. And Michael will take the second half of this question, or he added to it this morning very eloquently.
Yeah, I think, you know, family is important. Basically, if you want to, you know, show a light to your family, you know, especially if they're not believers. An example that they're also important to, you know, to you. And so when we have services on Saturday night and Sunday, there are chances for us to be able to, you know, if there's something going on Saturday, we can always go Sunday, or vice versa. So I think you just have to look and say, does God want me to focus in on my family for this particular event or whatever's going on? So you just kind of prioritize and just ask God, where do I need to be today? Do I need to be at church? Do I need to be filled today at church? Or do I need to pour myself into someone else's life?
Whoever asked the question, I really do feel for you. We did have a huge pushback when we were new Christians, and we didn't have healthy boundaries with my family. So we were, but I just want you to know it is scriptural. If you have family members that are unbelievers, there is going to be pushback, whether you're at church a lot or not. The things of God they don't understand, and they might even fear. So I hope you're encouraged to be around believing women and staying in the Word to strengthen you in that way. So.
well, when your family, when they're not believers, you are the light to them, and you are witnessing to them, even if it's not in words, but in action. And we have some unbelievers in our family, and we do talk about the wonderful things that happen at this church, and we talk about MOPS, and we invite some of our unbelieving family to functions here at church so that they don't feel that this is my thing over here, and then I'll be with you over here. Try to get them together, and through little words that we say and how we act and being a witness, they might come along. And you never know how God is working within them, through you. And, it's really sweet. We see somebody in our family coming along just by talking and inviting them to functions, and they respond. And it doesn't have to be all the time, but periodically, hey, we're doing this. You want to come? But there's no pressure. So I think that's really important, because you can combine the two with God's help.
Question number 5. As moms, we have this great place through MOPS where we are encouraged and given tools on becoming a better mom, wife, friend, and woman of God. How or where can our husbands receive similar encouragement in their roles, aside from the events men's ministry hosts? Lloyd?
Obviously, I'm not a mom. I think we need to create FOPs. So that would be. No, this is awesome. This is my first in-person connection with you guys, and I just think it's awesome. What an encouragement for one another. I've, for years come to this church, heard about it, been a part of the auction, but to see it firsthand, what you guys have, is awesome. It's an awesome ministry. So you're lucky, and unfortunately, your husbands don't have it. I'm curious about this question only because the last part of it says, aside from the events men's ministry hosts. My first question that comes up is, are we talking about an unbeliever, or are we talking about a believer? Because if I'll answer it two ways. If we're talking about a believer who's attending the church but isn't wanting to plug into men ministries events, I can speak from experience on that, of what that looks like. There was a time, I'll tell a short story about our trek into the church. We'd come to the church for a couple of years, and we're really interested in not knowing anybody who's sitting in the back row kind of thing. It was great to come to a church, but knowing people, connecting with people, that was for everybody else to do. And then there came an announcement in the bulletin one year that was about a softball team. That they needed players for this church softball league, and this team, there was 4 teams at the time from this church, and we decided to go show up at a practice. And I should just say we met the Andersons, and the rest is history, because you guys know Stacy. But honestly, we had played softball for a couple of years, and she invited us to life group. They were hosting a life group, and for about 2 years she invited us to life group, and we were like, that's good for other people in the church, but not for the Lloyds, right? Life group, get real with people and transparent, no thanks. And then here we are today in front of a group of moms doing a panel, so it shows you how far God has taken us. So my point is if when I first was coming to this church as a believer, I didn't really want to connect with guys in the church because I was afraid they might know me and know my dark past and everything about me, and that was kind of frightening. But the only thing I could suggest to somebody in that situation is find one person in the church body. Connect with a couple, a guy, and start small and see where God takes you through that. But eventually there has to be some effort on the individual's part. They have to get uncomfortable and reach out, because we know people don't come, the person that's shy in the corner, people don't always approach, right? So there's got to be some effort. And now if we're talking about somebody who's not a believer, So obviously they don't want to come to men's ministry events. That person, you know, two things. One, anybody who knows that person, kind of like the family situation, somebody could try to reach out to that person and say, you know, invite them for coffee, invite a relationship, invite an opportunity to create a relationship and see what manifests itself out of that. Other than that, I don't really have the answer because I'm a believer and I rely on this church for my connection with men. If outside of the connections I have in this church body, I don't have that many friends outside the church body. I mean, I have some, but they're more text friends, occasional phone calls. But the people that I'm closest to are believers in this body, right? So.
I didn't submit the question, but I'm wondering if it doesn't mean that MOPS meets every week. We're with the same women. We're getting that constant fellowship with the same group of people every week, minus the break in the summer. And the men's events, in comparison, are few and far between.
Sure.
So I'm wondering if it's not referring to something more like that, where it's like...
There are men's life groups.
Okay.
So talking to Pastor Tim about some men's groups that meet would be huge. BSF for men, Bible Study Fellowship for men.
Is there really? For men?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's an awesome group.
Yeah. Men, and then,
You can find it online. BSF International, you can find it.
and I'll tell you real quick what started for me too was I was reluctant to go to the men's retreat for a couple of years. And then I finally went. And I haven't missed since. I think I missed 1 year because I just didn't feel like it and I regretted it. But I've been maybe 8 of the last 9 years. But when I first went, I was so uncomfortable there. I'm like, I can't believe I'm going to a men's retreat. I know 3 people that are here out of 80 guys. It's going to be so uncomfortable. And by the end of that retreat, I was so connected with a group of guys that, you know, are lifelong friends now. So just again, that little push. There has to be an effort, right? Somebody has to be, as uncomfortable it is. You guys came here, you had to get out of your comfort zone and I'm going to MOPS for the first time, it's scary, but you got over the hump and now look at you, so.
One other additional thing, if that person's not in a life group, men and women separate for the last half hour, and so it is, again, a weekly guide time as well.
She said that, and if they want to see reality in what goes on in life, in a lot of the men's life groups, when they break up, they're going to see messy. They're going to see guys who are going to share their struggles. We're going to be open and honest. We're going to pry into the lives of your spouse. They're going to know about our lives, and it's a great place to be when you can get there. So I would encourage.
There's no crafts.
Our life group does go bow hunting, so just remember.
I want to add to the comment about BSF. My husband and Pam's husbands both go to BSF on Monday nights in Everett, but there are also I think they call them satellite groups. There's one in Arlington and I believe one in Stanwood also, and I don't know which nights they meet, but you can... Thursday nights, okay. So yeah, there's definitely these men's groups for BSF, and next year they're studying John, which would be a great place for them to jump in. Okay. What kind of Bible studies have you done with your kids and would recommend? Maybe break down by age group.
Well, we fail. But that's okay, God doesn't. So we have not really done Bible studies with our children. And we have put them in D Club, and we ask them afterwards what they've learned, and we talk about that. We have a 5th grader who has done 3 years of the Breakout program, and he's getting ready to go on the mission trip to Blodgett. So with that, he's got his own Bible study stuff that he has to do during the week. And so as he's doing it and doing scripture memorization, I ask him about it and we talk about it. And sometimes it's just, do you understand what you read? Do you know what that means? And sometimes we're like, no. So we are able to talk about it. It's not an actual, study through a book of a Bible. And he's one who he likes stories. So he wants, a story of Samson. He doesn't want, your general knowledge type stuff. He wants the story and the action. And so we find some of those where he can read them and then we can talk about that stuff. And just recently, we talked to him about the Bible app on the phone because it has a lot of daily devotionals and they have youth ones and there's different topics and subjects and stuff, and so you can go through those together and find one, and it could be a 5-day, a 7-day, and he reads the Bible passage and then it talks about it, and so he's starting to do that, and he does it on his own, which is really exciting to see a 5th grader doing that. But as far as regular Bible studies, we have not done that.
So that's all I got. That's Fiona.
I would definitely, as a teacher of the breakout class for the past 9 years, I would really recommend once your child gets into 3rd grade that they do the breakout class. It's not for everyone because it is a lot of work, and they do have lessons and memory verses and lots of stuff, but it's an awesome program, and the middle school and high school leaders say the kids that come into the group from the breakout program just really are some of the leaders in the middle school and high school groups. There was a question?
I just wanted to share a resource. It's keysforkids.org. It's a daily devotional for kids. And
Keys?
Keys, K-E-Y,
Okay.
K-E-Y-S, for kids.
Keys for Kids.
It's a daily online devotional, and you can listen to it or read it, but they update it every day on the website. It's usually really applicable to a variety of ages.
Okay. Also, as the church librarian, there are numerous devotional books in the church library that very rarely get checked out, and they are available to be checked out for a whole year. So I would recommend you going and checking out that also.
And where exactly is the library? Do they know?
Do you guys know where the library is? It's just off the lobby where you check in. Just go the other way instead of to check in. So, Michelle?
So I have a pre-K kindergarten, which is kindergarten, we've been going through, it's published by the One Year Bible, and she's all about princesses, and it's Princess Game. And it breaks down a verse, and then there's a prayer, and sometimes there's an activity that we can do with her, but it was something I think my mom had found, because she is really awesome about helping me encourage faith in my kids. And then for my son, she found him a pirate treasure island kind of theme one about, and it focused about how digging for the treasure in the Word of God and stuff. And now Rick Warren has come out with Purpose-Driven Life for kids in this more preteen age group. And my son's working through that along with the club stuff too.
You guys are really lucky. There's so many resources out there anymore. You just have to look for them. Okay, number 7. Do you settle disagreements in front of your children or behind closed doors, and why?
Yes. Why? Because, oh, I'm sorry. Yes, you said, no, not yes to both. Yes to in front of them, or however it's worded, where they know that you're doing it. Because, why? Because someday they will grow up and they will leave you, and they will not be perfect in someone else's eyes, and there will be conflict, and they will need to know how to deal with it. So, yeah.
Yes, yes and no.
Oh, yeah, right.
If you're handling conflict unhealthily, if you're screaming,
My cat.
that is not a good place to do in front of your children.
Yeah.
Children catch. How does the saying go? Things are caught more than they're taught. Believe me, you can tell them what to do over and over and over, but they catch your behavior, and that's what they take into their relationship lives. Trust me, they do. We've experienced in our marriage, from what we've brought into our marriage, how I parent just like my parents parented until I learned how to parent differently. So they need to see how to correctly handle conflict. Conflict is not bad. Jesus addressed conflict throughout the Bible. That's what he did, and he did it very well. But conflict, to some people, is screaming. But her and I can handle a situation with finances and talk to each other in front of the kids, and they can see that. Matter of fact, we have somebody living with us right now, living with Heather, who needed some money. She came to us and said, hey, I need some money to get through the college stuff. And we said, hey, Brenda said, let me talk to Scott. She's like, as a loan. She said, let me talk to Scott. And when we sat down with her, she says, I've never experienced this. My mom would have just done it. Well, that's not biblical. There was a time when I would have just done it without including my wife. You have to be one, right? So they need to see how to correctly address conflict, and conflict isn't yelling. Conflict should be communication, and they see that communication is not always perfect, but that communication needs to happen. And if it's yelling, definitely not in front of your kids, because they're taking that into their next relationship.
I really, really appreciated Scott's caveat, because there are some of us that that's the way we were wired. We explode. You know, we're very explosive. So if you have that type of personality, take it behind the doors. Your children need to feel safe, secure. If it's an issue regarding them and their discipline, we handled that by going behind closed doors, because we believed that communication between the two of us and being on the same page at the end of the day was really an important thing. You don't want your children to see mom and dad are on polar opposite ends of this pole about me, and I can use that as a leverage. I can use that as a little bit of a bar. Those types of things, I think, are really, it's good to be behind closed doors. But your kids do need to see you work through things. That's healthy as well. So this is not a yes absolutely or a no absolutely question. I think there's room for both. And we all know how we feel when we've been in a situation where we're watching someone argue. And even as adults, I don't know about you, but I get a really sour feeling in the pit of my stomach, and I just feel like, oh, I wish they weren't doing this. So the intensity of the disagreement needs to be thought about as well. So if it's something that you feel is going to make your child feel insecure and unsafe about, take it behind closed doors.
Yeah, that's what I meant, all of that.
Yeah.
I really did.
Okay, our last question, it's 11 o'clock, go ahead and, okay. I've been with the same man for 8 years, have 2 kids together, but we are not married. Is it wrong for me to withhold sex as I'm walking in my journey with Christ now? And Pakswinsky's
So I have to tell you, when I looked over this list of questions, this would not have been my first choice to address, but God was nudging me. You need to handle this one. So the answer to that question is no, it's not. It is not wrong. Sex is a beautiful gift that God has given us. In the confines of marriage is how we are to use that gift that we've been given. So the rules have changed for you now that you have become a believer in Christ. We are to follow after him, follow his mandates. And he would say, I would like for you to be married. If you're going to be this intimate and have this incredible one-on-one relationship that we all know is sweet and God-given, you need to do it in the confines of a marriage. So that's the real quick answer. And communicate with your other half. Don't just close the door and say, that's it, no more. As we've said, all of these, 1 through 8, all take communication. So communicate where you're at, explaining fully, I am a new person under new rules, and these are not my rules, they're the rules of God. And I want to follow after him as earnestly as I can, and doing that means that we are no longer going to be in a sexual relationship.
I know, I'm getting the it's 11, but I have to. There's times when God says speak, and there's times that he says be quiet. This is personal to me. We were living together when we met. We became believers, living ignorant. Pastor came and visited us. We lived for 6 months celibate in the same house while we went through premarital counseling, while we sought after God. I slept on the couch. She slept in the bedroom. But that was an agreement between 2 believers. So I want you to write down a couple verses. Genesis 2:24 is a basis for all marriage from the point of Genesis on. And then go to Hebrews 13:4. And there's a lot of other verses. But anyway, I just want you to know that there's biblical grounds, and it's honoring God. If you're in a situation already where one's a believer, you're trying to go to church, and your boyfriend, that your partner you're living with isn't, that's a very good communication you're going to have. And if he loves you, trust me, if he loves you, he'll honor you. You're to honor God with your body. He will honor you. And if he doesn't, that's another conversation, and a tough one. But honor yourselves, women. Love yourselves, love God, and know that he wants better for you than what you're getting in that, because it's not a godly situation. So I'll get off my soapbox.
Okay. Ashley, do you have anything else to add?